Hey, hello, welcome. This has been Thinking About. I'm Jackie, and today I'm gonna walk you through how I made a fitted shirt using a free pattern I found online. So, starting off with the pattern, I used a free pattern from a brand called Gracia Atelier. I don't know how to pronounce that. Sorry. It is a Russian website, but they have patterns available in English. Some patterns are not free, but I picked a free pattern which is called the long shirt or the long tee pattern. Should have looked that up before I started, but now I've committed and my energy is too high for me to stop. And I really liked this pattern. It was very easy to use. It actually introduced me to my new favorite way of attaching sleeves. So, spoiler alert for that one. And to make this pattern, you'll need, of course, the pattern. It's a printed out pattern, so access to a printer, I guess. And you'll also need a stretch fabric. The pattern recommends a cotton elastane mix with like a 5% elastane, but I used a 100% cotton jersey and it worked out fine. You just need to make sure that there's got enough stretch for it to like kind of fit over your head, and if you want a more tight fit, for it to kind of stretch and contract to the parts of your body. So you'll just need those two things. Oh, also thread and, would you believe, a sewing machine. So the pattern is actually for a long sleeve shirt, but I wanted to use it for a short sleeve shirt. So all I had to do was I found a shirt that I liked that the seam was on my shoulder, and I measured the length of that sleeve and then added seam allowance of 2 centimeters. If you don't have a shirt like that, you could just measure from your shoulder to a point at which you think you would like the sleeve to be and then add seam allowance. It's always easier to make something long and then cut it down. But it was a really easy adjustment, and I've already made 2 shirts with different fabrics with this pattern. And I also have some merino jersey that I want to use that I think I'll make a winter version of this, like a long sleeve, and it'll be really nice. So I'm really excited about this free pattern. I also had to change the length because I'm short. So I just measured from my shoulder down to my hip, which is how long I wanted the shirt, and added some seam allowance and made it that much shorter. I have a rogue hair that is like driving me mental. But yeah, so that's that. Let's get into it. So starting off with cutting out my pattern, I laid both pattern pieces on the fabric on the fold. Now I stuffed up here because I should have put them next to each other so that the stripe continued on, but I put them vertically, or I stacked them on top of each other, which means that because this is a stripe, the stripe doesn't look continuous. It's not a big deal, and honestly I was at the train station the other day and a lady had a shirt where the seam wasn't even close to aligning, and I thought, well, that woman paid for that one and it looks like crap, and mine's only like maybe like a centimeter off, and it's okay, but don't do it this way if you're using stripe. Do one on the fold, then fold the fabric again, and right next to where you cut that other one out, cut the back, like cut the front and then cut the back. And anyway, so that's what I did. I cut out the fabric. Excuse my elbow here. It's really hard to cut this fabric, or cut fabric in general, with a camera. The table's really wide. I'm really short. This was the best I could do. It is what it is. But once I cut out both of those, I moved on to the sleeve. So because you want the sleeve stripe to continue on this horizontal pattern, you fold over the fabric so that you get the two, they're the same, and the stripe will be long ways instead of short ways. Is that how you say that? That sounds crazy. Now, as I said, this is originally a long sleeve shirt and I made it short sleeve. I couldn't be bothered to cut the pattern, so I just folded it where I was going to cut to. I folded the fabric that length, and then where that seam is where both sides were cut along. And it worked totally fine. If you don't have a striped fabric, you should still cut the sleeve in this direction, because this has the most stretch going this way, and you want the stretch to kind of go across your body, not down, so that it's not as tight. Okay, new location unlocked. Why am I holding the mic like this, by the way? So, I want to introduce you to my machine. This is my Genome. This is my Genome Excellence in Quality. Excellence in Quality is definitely the tagline and not the name of the machine, but this is my Genome. And the reason I'm introducing you to her is because I wanted to talk about stitching on stretch fabric. Now, she's not a new machine. She's from the 80s. So what I tell you might be different for your machine because I don't really understand the machines with the digital things. But I wanted to talk about stretch stitching, as I just said. So when you sew something that's a stretch fabric, if you just use a regular straight stitch, it's going to snap because the fabric kind of expands and contracts as you pull, obviously. So it creates tension and then the thread that is very thin snaps. So you have a few options as a result of that to work around it with a regular machine. So I took out my instruction book. There you go. That's the actual name of it. ME4014. Do with that what you will, babes. And on here, it mentions I should have just kept the page open. This is pure chaos. Whatever. It lists all the stretch stitches. So on this machine, we have two options. Now, can you see those options? Who knows? Okay, so as I said, on our machine, we have a few options. You'll see on mine, I have these dark blue. These dark blue are your regular stitches. You can use them with non-stretch fabrics. You can make your zigzag stitches, your fake overlocker stitch, which I never managed to do correctly, and your straight stitch. You then also have these yellowy orange colored. These are button. Then I have these like green ones on the inside here. These are what my machine refers to as SS stitches. I realize it's not in the frame now. These stitches are unlocked by me changing the setting here. Can you see that? I don't know. To SS. When I do that, it unlocks a whole new section of... When I was sewing, I chose to use the stretch stitch, straight stitch for when it was visible. And this stretch stitch, this one here, which kind of is a straight stitch with a vertical line when I was doing any seam joining. That was because that kind of hit two birds with one stone for me. It was a stretch stitch, and it also meant I didn't have to do some kind of zigzag stitch or overlocking stitch because my fabric didn't really fray. So when you use these stitches on my machine personally, the length of the stitch is preset. So I just change the setting to SS and I leave it there. Your machine might be different. But that's how I do my stitches. Okay, then once I had all my pieces, I started sewing. I was sewing the shoulders first. So I just pinned them and sewed straight down using the specific type of stitch I just mentioned, which is the horizontal and the vertical stitch to kind of act almost like a zigzag stitch or an overlocker stitch. Because this goes back and forth when you sew, it will be a bit slower than just a normal straight stitch. You can see here on my machine, it kind of like the fabric jarts back and forth. That's fine. Just don't pull the fabric. Just like kind of let it do its thing. And you can kind of see here what I mean with the stretch of the fabric and also that horizontal line. Now, as I mentioned, this is my new favorite way to attach sleeves. So this might be obvious to some people, but you can attach a sleeve before sewing the sides together, which is what I normally do. And I find it really annoying trying to get the sleeve to fit into the armhole. Whereas with this way, it's still two flat pattern pieces coming together. So I just pinned the whole way around. I probably should have started pinning from the middle rather than from that edge, but it worked out fine. And then I did baste this sleeve on. This is so that it doesn't slip while I'm sewing it, and it just kind of made the fabric a little bit sturdier. I think I was also doing it to ensure that the sides would align and nothing would get kind of off center or warped. It's a really fun, I was going to say fun. I don't know if basting's fun, but it's a really easy way to kind of level up your garment. So you just take any thread and you just hand stitch, like a straight stitch, the whole way along. And then what you do is once you sew it, you remove that stitch. And it's really, I don't know where I was going with that sentence. It isn't the quickest thing to do, but I do think it makes the garment like look a lot nicer. And I personally like it also because it means there's no needles when I'm sewing. So I don't have to pause while I'm sewing. I just like really enter that flow state. And once I had basted everything, I did the exact same stitch, the one with the horizontal and the vertical lines, to attach the sleeve to the shoulder seam. And it is slow going, but it's kind of nice because you also get a lot of time to make sure that your sleeve is like really aligned. And it's about the journey, not the destination. Once I had that sleeve attached to the shoulder, I repeated the same process on the other side. And then I unpicked the basting stitch, as I mentioned. So once I had all of that done, I aligned what is that called? The cross section of the sleeve and the side seam. And I used that as my guide to align the shirt sides. This is the moment where I'm realizing that my stripes do not align, and then I'm internally extremely frustrated with myself. And I could have just done 2 of these shirts and like made the seams align, but I didn't want to recut anything and I was already at this point. So I just accepted my fate and moved on. You can see here I'm trying to get it to align and I'm like, this is absolutely not gonna work. So then I was like, whatever, let's just like repin this whole thing. And then I chose to do a basting stitch as well. Now, this is also, because this is striped fabric, had I cut the fabric correctly, this would ensure that those stripes would line up and there would be no shifting of the fabric while I'm sewing. Obviously, as we have established, I didn't do that. But this is still really nice to make sure that that cross section, I'm going to call it that, I don't know if that's the correct term, of the side and the sleeve line up, because you don't really realize it when you're sewing sometimes, but the fabric does shift. It's actually quite difficult to get seams to align perfectly. I really envy quilters for that skill, but I've just found that basting the sides is the easiest way for me to get that correct. And then you guessed it, I sewed the sides, which I didn't film here because it's the exact same as the other process. And then I moved on to the neckline. Now, I don't know if I cut the fabric wrong or if I'm attaching the band wrong, but when I first did this, the band was a lot longer than the neck hole. Neck hole? I don't know if that's also correct. That doesn't sound correct. So I decided to just measure the length of the neckline. There we go, found it. And cut my binding based on that. As the pattern says, you should attach the sides of the binding to create a loop. And then once you do that, you're meant to attach this to the inside or to the inside of the shirt. But I attached it to the outside, and you know what? I don't think it really made a difference. So it is what it is. But imagine the shirt is inside out while I'm doing this. I'm pinning it the whole way around, and this is going to be my first stitch for the neckline. This first one, I'm pretty sure I still did the horizontal and the vertical fake overlocker stitch the whole way around, but I will do a different stitch for the next step. Also with this, you should try and get as close to the seam as possible because you're going to be folding this fabric over, and it's easier. It gives you a little bit more room, and it just works a little better, I guess, if you try and stay close to that seam. Otherwise, you'll just have a lot of bulk in your neckline. Then once I'd done that, I took the binding and I folded it over to the back and I tucked in the raw edges. This hand gesture is trying to show you that. And then I basted the whole way around so it didn't move. And then I changed the stitch to that straight stitch because this is a visible line. And then I followed the edge of the band. You could try doing, I think the reason you do it the other way, where you attach it to the inside and fold it over, is because you're meant to try and stitch in the ditch. I have not been successful in doing that. So I just accept that I'm going to have a visible stitch, to be honest with you. Now that the neckline is attached, I had to remove that basting thread because it was visible, which is deeply uninteresting. So we're going to skip over that and we're going to go to the hem. I just folded it once and kept the edge raw. It didn't really bother me because the fabric doesn't really fray. I could have folded it over a second time, and I'm not really sure why I didn't do that, but here we are. Also, bro, I have too many striped pieces. I just sewed these 2 striped shirts. I'm wearing a striped dress in this photo. I have another striped dress, and I just made those striped shorts. And I also am currently wearing a striped knitted cardigan that I made. And I love stripes, but I can't, stripes cannot be my brand. But here we are. At this point, the fabric was a little thick, so I did have to guide that through with not using the pedal foot and just using the hand crank thing on the side. That might be the case for you, might not be the case for you. But if it is over those seams, sometimes when you just kind of force them through, you skip stitches and things aren't straight. So it's better just to take your time and just do it manually. Yeah, so once I did both sleeves, I moved on to the hem. You can see my hem here is a little warped. That's because I attempted to do a zigzag stitch along the edge, kind of to stop the fraying, but it just stretched and warped the fabric. So we're just going to keep it pushing, and I decided just to do a double folded hem there to kind of hide my stuff up because I refused to unpick it, because the stitch goes you do multiple stitches in the one spot. With these stretch stitches, they're so annoying to unpick, and I didn't care enough. But I just pinned it the whole way along. A nice thing with stripes is that you can just align it to where the stripe is. And then I did the same straight stitch the entire way around. And there you have it. That's the shirt. Okay, and now it's time for the reveal. I should really have music for this, but we both know I'm not going to do that. Anyway, here's the shirt. You can see what I'm talking about with the misaligned seam. It is what it is. The shirt looks great. End of story. Okay, so there you go. That's the pattern. I really enjoyed making this one. As I said at the beginning, I've already made 2 versions of this with 2 different fabrics, and I wore them all through summer. So I'm really happy with it. I think these projects that kind of seem like everyday basics are things you kind of put off doing because you're well, I want to do something fun, or I can just buy a shirt. But the great thing with doing these everyday basics is, one, they can fit you the exact way you want them to. The second is that you can use a really high quality fabric, so you can get a really heavy use item out of a pretty simple pattern. I don't know how much fabric is where you live or how much clothes cost where you are, but I managed to get my fabric on sale. It was pretty cheap. I didn't need a lot of it. And to buy a high quality shirt like this would probably be $100. I'm not exaggerating. Everything is expensive in Australia. So there you go. So I hope you had fun doing this pattern, and I'll talk to you next time, I guess.